Today we're gonna fix a really annoying issue with part of our off-grid power setup. But before we get to that, if you're new, I'm Erica. My husband Mark and I and our 2 kids live fully off-grid in Canada. And we try to live a healthy, self-sufficient lifestyle and share about that in our videos. So if you're interested, I'd love if you'd subscribe. Now Mark's gonna tell you about this problem.
So one pretty annoying thing about this generator is that it is so close to the ground. It's really hard to access this stuff underneath. Filter's there. I can't get a pan underneath that. And the drain plug is way down underneath. But what they've done is they connected it to this nasty hose here. The oil pan is super low. You should really have that hose almost at ground level. This project is one I have wanted to do since the very first oil change I did on this generator, which is what you were just watching. That generator is so low to the ground, it is so difficult to do a proper oil change or any service for that matter. So today I'm building a frame to lift the generator. I haven't worked much with metal in the past. I am really excited to do some welding and see if I'm any good at it. This stand will be about 12 inches high, which should give me plenty of room, not only to do oil changes, but also just to work on the generator without having to crouch down so low in that cramped little generator room. I would have liked to do this project last summer after we moved in, but there were so many other projects that required my attention, along with a very busy work schedule, that it was put off. Once winter hit, the generator is our primary source of power. Now that it's spring and we have more daylight, the generator is not running nearly as much. I also have a much slower work schedule at the moment, so I've got the time to put into this project. I am using a MIG welder with flux core wire. Having not welded before, I did play around quite a bit with the speed and voltage settings. What I found was the high voltage setting was a little too hot and it was melting the steel more than I thought was appropriate, but the lower voltage setting seemed a little bit too cool. Pairing that with my inexperience, I did end up laying down way more material on most of my welds. But after further inspection, it does seem like I got a good bond on all of my welds, which is really the most important part. Having welds that look good and not wasting material are things that will just come with time and practice. Alright, so this is my first day welding. That's the first weld I did. Pretty horrific. This is the last weld. Not gonna win any awards, but I'd say a significant improvement. Still some serious problems, but can't complain for, you know, only welding for about maybe an hour. That's not bad of an improvement, I think. Welders, feel free to comment and tell me just how terrible of a job I've done. Two reasons why I'm grinding down these welds. First of all, because they look terrible and there's way too much material. Second of all, things like that. Because I've never welded before, I want to see how I'm doing. I want to see just how terrible my welding is. And if there's lots of imperfections, I can fix them. If it looks pretty solid, then happy day. So I'm just trying to learn and make sure I'm not doing too terrible of a job. When living off-grid, power consumption is something that must always be considered. Our solar system does do the job, but it is on the smaller side. It would be nice to have a bit bigger system, especially for when we have high power consumption projects like welding. In this case, we are trying to reduce the number of charge cycles on our batteries because they are getting old and a little bit weak. So for projects like this that require a lot of power, it just makes more sense to run the generator and save our batteries. Moving all this stuff to get access to the service door on the generator room has reminded me just how messy this area is and how badly I need to organize. I would love to have access to this door all the time. It would make servicing the generator so much easier. There are lots of odds and ends and scraps left over from the previous owners of this property, and also some that I have accumulated myself that I could definitely go through and clear out and make this space a little less cluttered. That would definitely help me to keep it organized and find places for all the equipment that I need to keep. My plan to lift this generator is to primarily use jackals to lift the generator and use blocking. This beam that I'm installing here will be used just at the end of the process to suspend the generator while I pull out the blocks and slide in the frame. The reason I'm using the jackals and blocking instead of lifting directly off that beam is because I was not confident that it would actually hold the weight of the generator. Throughout this entire lifting process, I was thinking to myself, why didn't I just borrow a block and tackle and a heavier beam from one of my farmer neighbors? It would have made this process so much faster and easier. Sometimes I just like the challenge of figuring out a solution to a problem with the materials and resources I have on hand. Although it would have been much easier and faster to use a block and tackle and lift this generator straight up in the air, it wouldn't have been as much fun. Lifting this end of the generator was a real breeze. I had lots of room for both jackals and plenty of blocking. However, as you'll see coming up here, the back was a lot harder. There's very little space in that end of the generator room, and I had no room for a farm awl in the far corner. So what I ended up doing was using a crowbar to lift inch by inch that back corner. Having the front of the generator blocked in the center rather than at the corners allowed the generator to tip back and forth fairly easily. So lifting that back corner with the crowbar turned out to be pretty easy. Once the generator was up to height, I pulled the blocking out of the front and threw it into the middle of the generator. Here I'm getting ready to remove the blocking and put most of the weight on the come along and beam. As I'm pulling out this center section, only the very back of the generator frame is resting on any blocking. The rest of the weight is held by the beam and come along. I was a little bit nervous about this. The generator is not balanced and it did want to tip. Now I'm setting up another stack of blocking just behind the generator frame. Here I'm lifting the generator off of the blocking and pulling it back just a little bit onto a new stack so that I could pull out the blocking and then slide the generator frame all the way under. This was a little bit tricky because pulling the generator back made it want to swing forward. With one hand I held it on the blocking and pulled out the other blocking, and then was able to lift it off of the final stack of blocking and let it suspend just briefly by the rod and come along, and then slide the frame into place.
All right, here's the aftermath of getting this frame underneath the generator.
It surprisingly fits pretty good. Now this room is still a complete disgusting pigsty, and so is the generator. But it's on the to-do list. I'll get it all cleaned up eventually. So the frame is bolted. You can't really see it right there. There's 4 bolts, 1 in each corner. And then I bolted the new frame to the old frame, obviously there, with lock washers and nuts. All the holes I drilled lined up on this half, but these ones back here did not line up. I was like a whole inch off, so I had to drill some new holes and throw some washers in there, but it worked. I gotta clean up all this nasty grime down here. That's it. Now I've got tons of space to do oil changes. You can see here, this is where the drain is for the oil. The previous owner plumbed in this valve and this long gross hose, so I can take all that off and put the oil pan down there and do an oil change properly.
If you're interested to learn more about our off-grid utilities, I'll leave our off-grid cabin tour here. Thanks so much for watching. We make a new video every week about our off-grid life, so I'd love if you'd subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye.